Welcome everyone, both in class and online. And astrological delineation with Astrodynes tonight is the first class. It is a 6-week class. I'm hoping we'll have fun. If not, we'll at least cover a whole lot of information over the next 6 weeks. My goal with this class is to make each of you a better astrologer. And my goal with this class is to get you to be able to look at a chart and be able to almost immediately pull out the most salient features about that chart. Oftentimes when we meet someone for the first time, we don't always have a lot of time with them. Even in professional settings, most educators tell us that usually after the first 45 minutes we've lost someone, that's when they're ready to nod off. So you need to get your information out quickly. I know some people that will do 2 or 3 hour readings. Few people can hold their attention span that long. I will feel very lucky tonight if I can keep your attention span for 2 hours. So it's important, if you're just looking at somebody's chart in passing, to be able to quickly pull out the most important factors. I have had a lot of clients over the years. I've been in practice for close to 40 years. And during this period of time, I've had many clients who have been to other astrologers. And one of the things they will say is, I learned more from you in the first 30 minutes than I did in an entire session before. And my response to that is, it has to do with the system that I work with. And that's what I'm going to be training all of you in. If you work with the system, you can get down to the meat of the matter. You can cut to the chase. You can give someone real keys about their character, temperament, disposition, using the system. Now, I'm going to start tonight with a quote, since I have by many students been called the king of quotes. This one is from Carl Jung, father of archetypal psychology, who says, he's writing now in a letter to Professor B.V. Raman. This is back in 1947. And he says, as I am a psychologist, I am chiefly interested in the particular light the horoscope sheds on certain complications in the character. In cases of difficult psychological diagnosis, I usually get a horoscope in order to have a further point of view from an entirely different angle. I must say that I have very often found that the astrological data elucidated certain points which I have otherwise would have been unable to understand. Now, a quote from Zane to give you a clue as to what we're going to be learning over the next 6 weeks. In Stellar Healing, he says, even as was necessary to gain precision in dealing with electromagnetic force, science had to establish standard units and mathematical methods. So also to deal more precisely with astrological force, we have had to establish standard units and given them names for the measurement of astrological power, the harmony of the astrological power, and the discord of the astrological power, and have had to devise mathematical methods of computing them. So this is what we're learning over the next 6 weeks. The word astro means star, and dyna means power. So Astrodynes are a means of determining the amount of power, harmony, and discord in any chart. And they are the result of independent research that was conducted by Church of Light students around the world during the 1930s and 40s. The results were then sent to headquarters in Los Angeles, where they were analyzed by Albert Benjamin, also known as C.C. Zhang, the author of our lessons, and they were compiled into the system that we have today. So, Astrodynes calculate power, harmony, and discord for the planets, signs, houses, and aspects in a chart. Tonight, we are going to focus on the planets. I've broken this down, so over the next 6 weeks, we'll be looking at different areas of an Astrodyne report and focusing our attention on them. We're going to be looking at a lot of charts over the next 6 weeks. Our goal is not going to be looking at any single chart in depth, but according to the theme that we're studying, be it planet signs, houses, aspects, we will be looking at that chart specifically from that feature and seeing how I've chosen charts of mostly notable people. And we'll be seeing how we can see the correlations between those powers in a chart and the personality of the notable person. Now, on to another Zhang quote. These are always very long. Those of you who've been students for some time know that. Sometimes a paragraph can also be an entire sentence. This one is not. I think it's 2 sentences. Dyna, used as a prefix, means power. Dyne is a standard unit of force in physics. Astrodyne, as the unit of astrological power, was first used by Lawrence W. Dunsmore in the January 1939 issue of The Rising Star. Harmodyne, as the unit of astrological harmony, and the discordyne as the unit of astrological discord were first used in 1946 by Albert Benjamin and W.M.A. Drake. Albert Benjamin and W.M.A. Drake worked out the mathematical method of computing the number of astrodynes, harmodynes, and discordynes represented by each birth chart aspect, planet, sign, and house, and by each progressed aspect, planet, sign, and house, and combination during the year 1946. They explained and illustrated the method in great detail in The Rising Star, commencing with the May issue 1946. This is found in Stellar Healing. Now, from another source material, which is the Astrodyne Manual, and here I'm actually going to show you the books. You don't have to have all of these. However, if you were to have 4 books in your astrological library that would allow you to first really understand the system and then be able to build up a vocabulary around it, it would be these books. And they're at the bottom of your page, on the very last page. So maybe not the last page, but page 8. Thank you. I have different handouts than you do. Mine are in 18 points, so I can actually read them. So, the Astrodyne Manual by Albert Benjamin. Probably my favorite, the book I learned from in the 70s as a student, was How to Read Cosmodynes by Doris J. Stone. Also at that time, I had the opportunity not only to study with Ken Stone, but his book, Delineation with Astrodynes, is excellent. And I must say, my favorite book, an astrologer is really only as good as their vocabulary. My favorite book is the ABC Basic Chart Reading by Lynn Palmer, who's a prolific writer and has been a Church of Light member almost as long as I've been alive, or at least since I was 6 years old. So, she's really good. And what the ABC chart reading is like a thesaurus for astrologers. It's broken down by planet, sign, and house, and the vocabulary is built up around that. What you'll see as we do astrological delineation, the entire process of reading a chart is to make language from symbols. And knowing this information allows us to do that and allows us to do it fluently in any number of combinations. So a little bit of break before the next long quote. This is from the Astrodynes manual, and Zane, or Albert Benjamin, they're the same man, but when writing for the Church of Light, his writings were all done as C.C. Zane. When writing for himself as an author, he wrote as Albert Benjamin. An individual is not born until the inner plane weather, as mapped by astrological positions, is closely similar to the organization of the thought cells within his unconscious mind. Thus, his birth chart is a very accurate map of his character at the time of birth. The power of each planet indicates the power of the thought cells it maps, and each aspect received by a planet indicates whether the thought elements ruled by the other planet involved in the aspect have entered into combination with the thought element ruled by this planet harmoniously, discordantly, or neutrally. So what are we looking at when we look at a chart? We are basically looking at an inner plane, outer plane relationship. Those of you who have studied with me over the years have had to suffer through this diagram many times, but it does explain how all of this works. We exist in two planes. The inner plane, which we call the astral, operates at a level above the speed of light. And the speed of light is 186,182 miles per second. I think Einstein calculated that, or someone else. Anything moving above the speed of light takes on a different relationship with time and space than is recognizable to us here. On the physical plane, which we call the outer plane, where our bodies exist, things are moving below this vibration. So, basically, the astrological chart is the map of the soul, or the blueprint of the soul, or the cross-section of the unconscious mind at the time of birth, as though you were slicing through an orange. And events happen here before they filter down into slower moving physical substance and having an impact in the world. That's how astrology works. So what's going on is the planets are not necessarily moving our bodies into action, but they are stimulating thought activities within the soul. They stimulate trends of thinking and trends of feeling, which move us into trends of acting, or we say that through psychokinesis, the power of the subconscious mind to impact matter, that we attract events and experiences of a very specific type or nature based on this inner plane weather or inner plane energy that's going on. Have I lost anyone yet? Good. So, our soul is built of thought cells. And this is what we're going to talk about tonight. So we know how to recognize these thought cells and how to identify them into a hierarchical order in each chart. We have thought cells that are aggressive, that may be social or affectionate. There are thought cells that are intellectual or language-based. There are thought cells that are emotional and domestically based, that have to do with our need to caretake. There are thought cells which stimulate our need for self-esteem or power or significance in the world. Other thought cells impact us through universal welfare, the need to be connected to something greater than ourselves. There are thought cells that are religious in nature, which is the belief in a higher power and the desire to act charitably towards others, to act with goodwill or optimism. Some thought cells are tied in with our own safety and self-preservation in the world, and can, if highly afflicted, make us somewhat self-absorbed or self-centered. They're almost antithetical to these thought cells of giving. Some thought cells make us individualistic, the need to be unique and different, to stand out from the crowd, to buck authority, to not be the same as everyone else, to search for the new and the original. And some thought cells make us utopian, dreaming of a better world or a better existence. So, we're built of thought cells. And that's what we're learning about tonight, is how to look at a chart and determine what the order of importance is of each of these thought cells in an individual's stellar makeup. To do so, we work with the Astrodynes report. And I'm imagining that everyone here has one. Those of you who are watching online, hopefully you have one too and have had one calculated at some point. If that is not the case, you have my email, christopher@light.org. Send me name, date, time, and place of your birth, and we'll get a PDF copy of that emailed back to you before the next class. Probably not until next Tuesday when I'm back in the office, because Sunday is service and a day of meetings here. So everyone wants to have this. What the Astrodynes report does is it maps our dominant trends in thinking, which are our dominant trends in consciousness. It informs us of the areas of greatest emphasis or importance within the chart. This is why someone can look at a chart and in half an hour give somebody more information than they may have received at another time, because you're focusing on the important things, the things the individual can most relate to. It also reveals the trends in thinking, acting, and the environments which are most conducive to the individual's success. Now, doesn't everybody want to know that? We want to be happy. We want to be successful. We want to have more spiritual lives. It also reveals the trends in thinking and those environments which are most detrimental to our well-being. Now, I imagine most of you have figured those out by now, but the advantage of being able to see this in the astrological chart is it helps to verify not only astrology, but it also helps for some people to get that aha moment of why they've been beating their head against the wall in certain areas of their existence. So this is what it looks like. The Astrodyne report. Oops. List for planets, houses, and signs. I've left the aspects out here. And then it also breaks it down into what we'll be looking probably at on the 5th or the 6th class of this session, is how to read these summaries of a chart, because there's a lot of information contained here as well. All right, my friend Doris Chase Stone, who said, testing this technique on the charts of natives with whom you are well acquainted will reveal how using cosmodynes. Cosmodynes is another word for astrodynes. Cosmodynes were used by Doris Stone and Howard Howe of Astronomerics Service, since astrodynes were a system that were trademarked by the Church of Light. Cosmodynes are basically the same thing. So back to the quote. Will reveal how using cosmodynes helps the astrologer to delve into the causes and inner motives of events. Further than that, inquiries into the apparent mysteries of actions and states of mind become more unbiased, more individualized, and more objective. So this is how we read the report. Column marked power shows the strength of the planets from the most powerful, largest number, to the weakest, smallest number. At the bottom of the planets, you will have a total power for that chart. The usefulness of that, I think, is yet to be determined, other than by knowing the total power in a chart, you can get a sense, much like the electrician can when he comes to your house and looks at your circuit breaker panel. They can get a sense of how many appliances you can run in your house. For the astrologer, when they look at this total, they get a sense of what is the total volume of energy this person is working with. Is it really powerful? Do they have great power at their fingertips? Or do they have moderate power or minimal power at their fingertips? But that's all it can tell you, because the chart can show you potential, but it cannot show you the purpose to which someone has directed their will. So, persons with weak to moderate charts can accomplish great deeds because they're using all of their power. I think the scientists tell us that we only use a fraction of our brain power, and it's also true with our astrodynes. Persons with really powerful charts may not always, they have the potential to accomplish more, but they may not always do it if their will is not directed or applied to such accomplishments. So this number, which we find at the bottom here, is limited in the information it gives us. It's other than, glancing at your circuit breaker panel may tell you whether you can add a hot tub to your house. But it won't necessarily tell you if the house is running a washer, a dryer, a dishwasher, a microwave, an electric oven. But you can see what the potential is. How many appliances can I run? Back. So, basic rule of thumb, power is the volume of energy expressed by any planet, sign, house, or aspects. They are broken down in a chart. Planet, signs, houses, and aspects. We only total the power of the planets. what this tells us is the greater the volume of power, the greater level of expression that planet can have in the individual's life. What I find to be very important in looking at a chart, and I'm going to let a little air into the room here. Excuse me as I wander around. Ugh. I think this will work. I've got a back window open too, so maybe we'll get some cross ventilation. Last 2 days haven't looked like we've needed air conditioning. So, what was I saying? Okay, what's important here is each combination is different, and it shows us the individual hierarchy of needs. And to what degree those needs are operating. In this case, we see the needs of domesticity, the needs to be a caregiver or a caretaker are greatest in this chart. It's hard to see, but we'll get to this chart later. The most powerful planet is the moon. Nesting, nurturing, caretaking, familial. The weakest power in this chart is the sun. So the lowest needs here are for ego satisfaction. Yet we know through our studies with occultism that everyone has a drive for significance, and it's something that's in every life form, not only to feel alive and to feel more powerful, but to have survival. But in this chart, these are going to be the urges or the drive or the hierarchy of needs that are receiving the least amount of expression. So maybe somebody who has power but is not necessarily looking for personal power. All right. The middle column, which is marked with the percentage sign. The percentage symbol is here. What this gives is what I find to be the most important information when we're looking at the Astrodynes, especially of planets, which is, okay, how much is that hierarchy? Stemming from the most powerful, taking up 14.4% of this individual's thought energy or consciousness or life experiences, down to the ego drives, the power urges, which are taking up only 2.5% of this individual's airspace, so to speak. So that's really important to look at. Again, what you're doing when you're looking at a chart and using Astrodynes, you are fast tracking to the information. For me, Astrodynes eliminates much of the guesswork that one has when they look at a chart. And the last thing we look at is the column on the right. This is marked harmony. Harmony, in the case of the Astrodyne report, is both harmony and discord. What we could also call that column is conditioning. And what can is the ability of that planet, sign, house, or aspect to attract either pleasurable events into the individual's life or painful events into the individual's life. It is what in past days we may have referred to, or even maybe next week I could refer to it as fortune or misfortune. Is it working for me, or is it working against me? Now the great thing is, when we work with the horoscope program, the Church of Light software that was designed by Paul Brewer, we have the ability to sort Astrodynes in a couple of ways. We can sort them neutrally, which places them in columns according to the descending order of the planets that we use in astrology: Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, midheaven, and ascendant. We can sort them by power, which is how I have sorted them. Because what I'm looking at first when I look at a chart is, what is the potential, where is the focus? Then I can shift my eye over to the next column to see how big is the number, and does it have a minus sign in front of it? But you can sort a chart with this column, which will be from the most harmonious down to the most discordant planet. And again, at a glance, it offers you the ability to look at a chart and tell someone with a few keywords where their pleasurable conditioning comes in, where they're able to attract things to themselves with ease, and where their discordant conditioning takes place, where they tend to most naturally have painful conditions in their life, or where they're sort of beating their head against the wall, or experiencing suffering or conflict of some kind. This is especially important, and I think next week when we look at the signs, we'll look at it from the perspective of health. There are great debates among astrologers in terms of which zodiac to use, tropical or sidereal. And using Astrodynes and looking at them from the perspective of health is one of the things that has really helped to convince me of the efficacy of the tropical zodiac. Because you will see pretty much across the board that people have problems in the zones of their body that are marked by either weak or discordant signs. So, Astrodynes. One reason these were included in the book Stellar Healing is Astrodynes are a fast track to stellar diagnosis. When you're looking at a chart and telling someone where they have a potential for problems, what the hot zones are that they need to watch in their body. All right, conditioning. Astrological conditioning, and it's important for us to grasp these concepts in the first class of the series. But astrological conditioning is determined by the innate nature of the planet. What the heck does that mean? The innate nature. Well, let's go back. I'll tell you. The innate nature of the planet is Jupiter and Venus are the benefics. Jupiter brings 1/2 harmony, Venus 1/4 harmony. Saturn and Mars are the malefics. Saturn brings 1/2 discord, Mars brings 1/4 discord. So we add these up in Astrodynes. The rest of the planets are neutral. So their innate conditioning energy is neutral. Essential dignities is usually something, it comes out of classical astrology, and it's something that we learn early on when we go to read charts. But essential dignities, most of you know at least one column of essential dignities, which is called home. The sun is at home in Leo. The moon is at home in Cancer. Mercury's at home in both Gemini and Virgo. That Venus is at home in Taurus and Libra. Mars is at home in Aries and Scorpio, so on and so forth. But there are other essential dignities, which are the home. There is also the detriment, the exaltation, the fall, the harmony, and the inharmony of a planet in signs. Each of those positions, try and think of this a little bit. You all familiar with the story of the three bears and Goldilocks? All right. They're going through her house, or she's going through their house. I think she broke it. That's what she did. And she's trying the beds. You know, one's too hard, one's too soft, the other is just right. And that's what essential dignities do for us. When we look at any planet in a chart, we're looking at, you know, where is it too hard, where is it too soft, and where is it just right? And it gives us those keys. Now, essential dignities are not that strong, but they do bring a mild amount of conditioning energy into the chart. Aspects are key in determining conditioning energy, because we have, not only do we have three types of planets, harmonious, discordant, and neutral, we have three types of aspects, harmonious, discordant, and neutral. And the aspects vary from being very powerful to very weak. So we can have powerful harmonies and weak harmonies, and powerful discords and weak discords, which are based on the relationship in which the planets meet with one another in the chart. Astrodynes do all of this for you. Now, when I was practically a child, in my early 20s, and learning all of this, we had to do Astrodynes by hand, because I don't think there was an astrological program in place until about 1978. Few people had personal computers back then, and one of the first personal computers developed was a small machine that was developed to calculate charts. And it would spew out on a ribbon, much like a adding machine, you know, a chart in a very, very simple form. But it would calculate house cusp and planetary positions and aspects. Though you weren't at that time able to program it much to use certain types of aspects, nor did it have hermetic aspects. It was later that Astronumeric Service developed a computer program for calculating astrodynes and hermetic progressions, and then they were available through mail order. And by the 80s, personal computers started to become more in use, and software was developed. But I don't think we got the Church of Light software until around 1972, maybe, 1992, 20 years ago. So that's a relative innovation for Hermetic astrologers. So what Astrodynes do is they are a formula that calculates all of this and then gives us the information that we're looking for. So tonight, we're talking about the planets. And just to give you a little history, without putting you to sleep, in ancient times, astronomers noted how what appeared to be certain stars moved across the night sky in relationship to other stars. The ancient Greeks, working on the systems prior to them, Egyptian and Chaldean, Near Eastern, called the wandering stars planetes asteres, or planetoi, wanderers, from which today's word planet was derived. In Hermetic astrology, we work with 10 of these, even though a few years back Pluto was demoted by the scientific community to being a planetoid. We're still working with them. And each of the 10 planets represents different urges in the soul. Now think about it. You all have urges.
Are you looking around for someone who doesn't?
I was. Where? They left the room. We could describe them in different ways. Some of you may have urges to be the smartest in the class. Others may have the urge to have dinner right now because there wasn't time between leaving home and getting here to do that. There are urges that may drive some of you to the restroom before the evening is out. One of you might have the urge to smack someone next to you because they just really irritate you. We all have different urges all the time. Astrologically, these urges are defined. And they are described as power urges, domestic urges, intellectual urges, social urges, aggressive urges, religious urges, safety urges, individualistic urges, utopian urges, and universal welfare urges. Now, we are summarizing it here in just one word. And what's important to know is I teach from a keyword system. That if you can just at first memorize one word, and it is easier to advance in astrology if you're good at memorizing things. You have to memorize symbols, their English equivalents, or whatever language you use, and the things that they represent. These are also symbols. These are symbols for feelings and experiences and states of consciousness. It is from the single word keywords that we start to break off and add things such as best quality, worst quality. And then we go on to add whole other levels of vocabulary. And as you learn those in steps, in almost a reverse pyramidal form, your vocabulary builds up and expands. All right, they're all on the page now. The thing we're going to be looking at next week I got these out of order. All right, the most powerful or dominant planet shows the predominating desires in an individual's chart. This holds the key to his or her most significant life patterns. If the power urges are dominant in your astral makeup, what are your life patterns going to be about?
Advancing yourself.
Advancing yourself, bossing other people around, sometimes putting other people down in hopes that it will elevate your position. The need to take on responsibilities or roles in leadership and authority.
Being challenged?
Yes and no. You might like to, depending on where the sun falls and its harmony or discord, you might like to be personally challenged in the sense of always doing your personal best.
Right.
But you may not always like being challenged by other people, because that might be perceived as a defiance of your authority. So some people, and if it's a harmonious sun, they're always moving towards greater achievement. Now, what happens is, and some of you in this room, some of you online, may have charts that show one planet exceptionally powerful above all the others. These charts are easier to read. It generally indicates a particular set of skills and abilities that is highly developed and focused. Add a D to the "and." Other charts may show 3 or more planets of nearly equal strength and are referred to as prominent planets. This means, think of a relief map from when you were in 3rd or 4th grade. Flour, salt. Prominent means it stands up off the board. So these planets, if they're similar in strength, they're all going to be standing out in your character, and they're vying for your head, so to speak, in terms of which will be the most powerful influence. Sometimes they appear to be interchangeable. So these desires are all competing for expression and make it harder to develop the single-mindedness of purpose that is found in a chart with just one planet dominant. How many of you know your Astrodynes? How many have them with you and can look at them? Okay. Next week, look at your chart and look at the column of the planets to see, look at the top 3 planets, look at the percentage. Are they similar in power? Some charts you might find the top planet is 10.9, the next planet's 10.8, the following planet's 10.7. They're all within 0.2 of a degree of power. And they have this person moving in several different directions because those urges are almost equally important. If you had one planet that was maybe at 14.99 Astrodynes, or percentage of the chart, and then the next one under that might be 9 or 8, you're going to see that there is this remarkable distance between those planets. And this is something that stands out and makes for that single-mindedness of purpose. So, the planet showing the most cosmodynes, Astrodynes, is the ruler of the chart as it pictures the strongest energy potential. If you had 15 minutes with someone and had their chart in Astrodynes and were going to give them information about themselves, if you just commented on their dominant planet and described it in details, they would feel like they left with a very thorough reading. Because you would have put your finger on their soul, so to speak. Now, what Zane says about that, and this is a shorter quote, the dominant planet usually stamps its impress upon the countenance. This planet may or may not be one of the ruling sign. No, it may be the one ruling the rising sign. It is simply the one, all things considered, such as house position, signs, and aspects, that has the most influence over his life. It used to be in classical astrology, one would look at dispositors in a chart, which is a somewhat complicated system of what planet is in the other planet's signs and how they're related to one another. And or the traditional rule of thumb in classical astrology was to look at the planet governing the sign on the ascendant at the time of birth. Yes, Barb, a question or comment?
Fred asks, what if an angle is at the top?
We're going to get to that, so hold your horses, and in about half an hour, we'll discuss that.
So countenance, meaning they look like that sign. Is that what you
To some degree, but one's countenance can also be
their demeanor?
their personality, their self-expression. Though typically we think of countenance as this.
Yeah. Especially because it used to be considered that whatever was the rising sign tended to affect the way you look. If
Correct.
Somebody would look like their rising sign.
Right, so the planet governing the sign on the ascendant would oftentimes be that, but definitely look at the dominant planet in someone's chart. It will definitely give you a certain clue to their features. This area I'm not going to concentrate on too much tonight just because our time is limited and I want to get to actually looking at charts. But basically, this is about essential dignities, which is looking at the signs in which a planet falls. In beginning astrology classes, I teach this primarily when we're looking at the home, the detriment, the exaltation, the fall, the harmony, the inharmony of any planet. But the way we read planets in a chart is as though they were distinct musical notes. Each planet has a tone. The sign in which they fall is basically the instrument on which they are being played. Now, musical tones are basically air moving at a particular frequency, whether that air is being vibrated on a woodwind, on a string instrument, brass, so forth and so on. It sounds different to us played on a cello than on a trumpet, but it is still movement at a particular frequency. So basically the signs are the different instruments and the planets are the tones. So Venus in Aries is going to sound different than Venus in Taurus or Venus in Gemini or Venus in Cancer. Yes.
The planets are the tones and the signs are
The instrument. And that should be in your notes too, just so you have it. I've included a table of essential dignities, not for us to cover in class tonight, but I think that everyone should have one just as a reference at some point. Sitting down with your chart, it could prove to be interesting to you, or if you start to read other people's charts, just looking, how is this planet expressing? We've got the sun in Libra here. How does that impact the individual's self-esteem, self-worth, and perceptions of importance? All right, the houses, which we're going to talk about in 2 more weeks. They are the divisions of the horoscope, which correspond to different areas of thinking, activity, and interest. The houses basically are the part of the chart which looks like a pizza pie cut into 12 slices. As a planet occupies a house, it brings its specific influences into that department of life. This is key when we're looking at the planets in terms of their power. Because not only do we want to know what's powerful in that chart, is it the universal welfare urges? Is it the utopian urges? Is it the individualistic urges? And if so, what area of this person's life are they stimulating? Are they stimulating the area that has to do with their early education and studies? Does it have to do with their relationships, companionships, marriage? Does it have to do with their friendships, their associates, and group activities? So you want to know, okay, this is what drives the person. And And are they driving on the right or the left side of the car, basically?
Christopher?
Yes.
And it, excuse me, it doesn't really matter whether that's an outer planet or an inner planet.
Nope.
It would still carry the cloud.
It does. The dominant planet carries the cloud. If it's an outer planet, everyone just thinks you're a weirdo.
Except that your whole generation has the, similar trait of playing
In
that
terms of-
tone with that instrument.
Right, but you have at least a variety of 12 houses it can be in, and its prominence will be due to the number and type of aspects it's receiving.
Mhm.
So, being an outer planet, if you're dominated by the universal welfare urges, that holds true for you. It's just the way in which it expresses is generational, because although Pluto's orbit is so eccentric, it sometimes could be in the sign for 10 years or 20 years.
That's my most powerful planet.
Yeah, you're still going to be always searching for community, Laura.
It's in the 11th house.
Right. And hopefully they'll be friendly.
Yeah. It's conjunct Saturn.
Maybe not.
But
Gotta
Venus
watch my
is on one
language.
side and the Sun's is sandwiched by Venus and the Sun. So
Okay.
love and light sandwich that
All right, there's still hope
difficult
there.
conjunction, yes.
All right. These are all in your notes, and most of you know these from previous levels of study, so I don't want to focus on that tonight. But let's move on. A point to be made here, good for all planets, is that a dominant planet will affect temperament regardless of house. The house occupied indicates the department of life that the house represents is most often and strongly concerned with the temperament. In other words, where a dominant planet is located indicates the area of life whose influence in response to the planet is a major factor in the life. Now, one of the dominant factors related to Pluto is conformity. It doesn't necessarily mean that you want to conform, but you'll have a lot of experiences in your life where other people would like you to conform. She says. So, that's how that works. That was a quote by Ken Stone. Unfortunately, I don't have any photos of that now. Zane says the relative power of a planet indicates the relative power of the thought cells of that planetary type in the unconscious mind, and thus the relative power of the natural aptitudes characteristic of the planet. The more powerful the natural aptitudes, the easier it is to develop them into ability of their particular planetary type. But in addition to influencing the thoughts and the behavior, the thought cells possess psychokinetic energy or psychokinetic power by which they bring into the life conditions and events of the kind they desire. The aggressive urges desire a different trend of events than the domestic urges. Therefore, the more powerful a planet is in the birth chart, the more power the thought cells it maps have to bring into the life conditions and events of its type. So let's just talk a little bit about the planets tonight so we can get a clearer sense of temperament and personality. My lifelong interest prior to starting my study of astrology at around age 13 was world mythology. So I pull a lot of my archetypes out of mythology. And the sun, to the Egyptians, was known as Aten. He traveled in a solar barge. His presence during the day created daytime, and his absence night. To the Greeks and Romans, the sun was Helios or Apollo, and he rode in a chariot, governed medicine, healing, and the theater. The sun, just in terms of essential dignities, the sun rules or is at home in the sign of Leo. What this means is we can see similarities between the planet and the sign. The sun is the power urges. Lions are the king of the beast. They want to roar. They want to be in charge. So we see the familiarity or the similarity between the planet and the sign that it rules. Now, we describe these urges of the sun as the power urges. On the most basic level, the power urges are our vital life force. They are the thing that animates us. This expresses in life as our sense of significance, a need for relationships with authority figures if it's dominant, but regardless of how powerful the sun is in your chart, its position, its harmony, its discord, its relative power describes the nature of those relationships. The sun in a chart indicates our relationships with the male sex in general, more specifically the father or father figures. And the relative power or harmony of the sun in the chart indicates our ability to attract such things as awards, honors, and recognition into our life. So, what we say when we're looking at a chart is the house in which the sun falls is subject to vigor. The best quality which the sun carries with it, wherever it is, are the qualities of rulership. Rulership has to do with the ability to guide and direct other people. And a ruler does so by listening to the needs of those who he or she governs. On the other hand, if you're not listening, then the negative traits associated with the sun. If the sun has many discordines in the chart, the one word you need to remember is dictativeness. The person with a discordant sun can be dictatorial in nature. They want to govern or rule, not based on the needs of those that they're governing, but based on what their own desires are. The sun is neutral. It has neither harmony or discord. So its harmony or discord in a chart is based on, is it in relationship with Venus and Jupiter or Mars and Saturn? What are the nature of the aspects being formed to the sun? Now, if your sun is powerful in your chart, and if it is harmonious, then you are somebody who will tend to attract in leadership opportunities. You might have abundant vitality. It's easy for you to gain the respect of others. Honors and awards come to you somewhat easily. And your experiences with authority figures will tend to be positive. On the other hand, if the sun in your chart is discordant, then you may be subject to issues related to pride. You can be dictatorial. There are going to be areas of egotism. There are going to be times in your life where you suffer from losses of honor or losses of self-esteem. Rather than getting awards, other people may be talking badly about you or trying to humiliate you publicly. And it will tend to bring in trouble with authorities. So when the police pull you over, keep your hands on the wheel. All right. These are keywords to work with. With just this amount of vocabulary, you could look at a chart, look at the dominant planet, if it was the sun, and give somebody a reading. In mythology, the moon is considered feminine, though in certain Latin American native cultures, Incas, I think the moon was masculine. Artemis Diana, the daughter of Zeus and Leto, was twin to the sun god Apollo. Worshipped throughout the Hellenic world, Artemis was eventually replaced by Selene as the moon goddess. Look at this goddess. What does she have? Does she have two breasts?
Many.
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 So, that's what the moon person feels like. If you ever go to State Fair and see the sow lying down with 8 piglets suckling, moon people oftentimes feel like others are sucking out their life force. Because they are there trying to succor, nurture, take care of, calm and care for and nurse those around them. The moon governs the sign of Cancer. And in the soul, the urges which the moon rules are called domestic urges. The domestic urges have to do with domesticity, which is home and family and nesting and nurturing and caregiving and nursing. But it also, the moon affects our moods, emotional states, mental attitude, everyday affairs, relationships with the female sex in general, and or the mother or mother figures. So, we consider the positive trait of the moon as being adaptability. The person who can adjust to whatever is going on. Adaptability, Darwin tells us, is key to survival. Because an organism has to continually adapt to an ever-changing environment in order to survive, or for successive generations to survive. The worst trait of the moon, however, is moodiness. So usually you can identify the moon people in the room. Just watch their faces. It's so hard for them to hide what's going on with them. And their faces will rise and fall according to their momentary moods. The moon also is neutral. Now, both the sun and the moon in astrology are known as luminaries, and they are given slightly more power than the rest of the planets. We have the orb of day and the orb of night. So, if the moon is dominant and harmonious, then you are somebody who is going to have a lot of positive experiences within your home and family. Your life will not lack opportunities to be caring, compassionate, and nurturing. You may be somebody who has heightened experiences with intuition and positive interactions with women. However, if the moon is discordant, you're going to tend to be passive, submissive, impressionable, moody, temperamental, fluctuating emotions. You could be fickle in your feelings. You could have problems with women or be the victim of gossip. I call the discordant moon the New Mexico Wine Festival.
Would it make for passive aggression?
It can.
Sort of covert, I don't know. Sometimes moon people can be very out front with their...
It would depend if it's an
expression.
aspect with Mars.
Okay.
Because yes, there are forms of passive aggression and there are forms of active aggression.
Right.
The moon, however, does tend towards passivity, which usually it's not directed aggressively towards others, but it's, it's the old joke, how does a mother change a light bulb? Oh, I'll just sit here in the dark.
That's a Jewish mother.
Hi.
You cleaned it up. You made it PC.
I wanted to make it non-ethnic
Yes.
because it could
Yes.
apply to anyone attending the New Mexico Wine Festival. Now, Mercury was known as Hermes. He was the son of the union of Zeus and Maya. And in Greek mythology, Hermes was the god of weights and measures, commerce and cunning, boundaries, travel and travelers, wit, literature, oratory, and poetry. He sounds ADD. Our words merchant, merchandise, and mercenary all have their origins in Mercury, the Roman god of trade. Astrologically, Mercury is at home in both Gemini and Virgo. Now, he governs what we call the intellectual urges, which have to do with studies, mental interest, writing, intellectual activity, but also accuracy in calculations and memory. But a prominent Mercury always attracts opportunities for communication, for self-expression. So we say where Mercury falls in the chart, that area is subject to thought, and of which the best quality of Mercury will be expression. Mercury people can be articulate and expressive and language-based. Their worst quality, however, is nervousness. Have you ever been around people who just literally vibrate? They're like human chihuahuas, where they're just sitting there and they're like shaking and their mere presence makes you nervous being around them. That could represent an afflicted Mercury. I always say their engine's running. Oh, I can see your engine's running. Mercury is neutral. If Mercury's harmonious in your chart, you will have plenty of opportunities to express your intelligence. You'll be perceptive, you'll have constructive communications, you'll tend towards being reflective, analytical, evaluating, you'll enjoy exercising reasoning and logic. However, if Mercury comes under the column which has a negative sign in front of the number, you're going to tend to be critical. You'll have poor communication skills. You'll make errors in calculation or in memory. You'll suffer from nervousness, anxiety, maybe a neuroses or two, mental ruminations, and forgetfulness. What are ruminations?
When you chew your cud.
When you chew your cud.
What about Mercury retrograde in your chart? Do you have feelings for it? It depends on whether it expresses harmoniously
or discordantly. Generally, retrograde planets in a chart are considered to be repressed, that they come into fuller expression later in life or under undue pressures. Mercury retrograde in a chart might tend to make someone less expressive, but more attentive to detail. If it's discordant, I find people with Mercury retrograde. Do you remember the days of vinyl? Did any of you have a record player? I know you probably didn't. But for us older folks, we had our record players. In my day, they were even called Victrolas. The earliest models we had. My grandma still called it the Victrola, and it had the Morning Glory. But what was a broken record? If a record was scratched or cracked, it would go around a circle, and then the needle would go back into the same passage again. And it would just keep repeating itself. So to me, retrograde Mercury is similar to that experience of a loop or a broken record, where the mind has this tendency to keep going over and over and over the same thing, thinking that repeated effort might possibly come up with a solution. What would we do to get on to the rest of the song? Lift the needle up out of the groove and drop it down again on the next track. So that's what Mercury retrograde people have to do. They've got to lift the needle up out of the groove and put it onto the next track.
That's a good analogy, Christopher.
But it only works with people born prior to about 1984. So I'll have to find a new one. Beauty. Venus, or Aphrodite, was born from the ocean's foam. It's kind of a creepy story, because it happened after Kronos castrated Uranos and threw his genitals into the sea. Many images picture her rising on a shell out of the ocean. The most famous is here, Botticelli's Birth of Venus. Apples, limes, myrtle, pomegranates, and roses were considered sacred to this goddess. Among animals, she ruled dolphins, doves, sparrows, and swans. And among the signs of the zodiac, Taurus and Libra. Venus, if she is strong in your chart, means that you will have highly developed social urges. What does that mean?
Interacting with other people.
Yeah, you don't like to be alone, and you don't like to say no.
And you're a people person.
People person. But it also means other people love you. Because you're either beautiful or charming, or both, or have artistic skill. So, what Venus does is she attracts friendships and socializing, affection, romantic opportunities, gratuities, gifts, pleasure, experiences with beauty and the arts. We say that wherever Venus falls in the chart, that area of our life is subject to gratuities. What are gratuities? Gifts. You know,
Windfall.
there's always a line on the bill at the restaurant for gratuities. It's a tip. You know, it's a little extra. Now, the best quality of the Venus person is they have affection. We are drawn to their warmth. And the worst quality of them is their pliancy. They're always giving in to make everyone around them happy. They have what we might call the disease to please. Venus is not neutral. She is known as the lesser benefic. And this means wherever she falls, she brings a quarter harmony with her. So, if by chance Venus in your chart is strong and harmonious, you are somebody who will live with heightened creativity. Your life will have affectionate or romantic opportunities. Your life will be filled with gifts and gratuities. People will always be giving you things. You will tend to, more than your peers, have increased cultural interest. And much like the acrobat at the circus, you will appear to go through life with greater ease than others. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's so, but to those around you, it simply appears that way. if your Venus is discordant, then you are going to suffer in life from loss of love, disappointments with your friends. You could go through periods of creative blocks, downright laziness at times, and or over sensuality. It's not just a piece of cake. You know, it's half the cake. Bonbons in bed. Aries, or Mars. Now, to the Greeks, Aries represented the unpredictable violence of war, which could express as bloodlust and savage warfare. Aries' quadriga, or chariot, was pulled by 4 fire-breathing stallions. Didn't want to run into them in a dark alley. In Sparta, he was propitiated before battle. Among the Romans, Mars was well-liked. Unlike his Greek counterpart, he rivaled Jupiter as the most honored god. Under the stellar religion of the Babylonians, Mars was Nergal, the fiery god of war and destruction. So, he is the chief ruler of Aries and the co-ruler of Scorpio. These are both bellicose signs. Either will pick a fight with you if you stay around long enough. Now, in a chart, Mars governs the aggressive urges, which have to do with courage, passion, strife, antagonism, effort. We do say that wherever Mars falls in your chart, that's an area where you will experience strife. His positive traits are initiative. Oops, what happened? Come back. Almost.
Here we go.
Oh, that Mars, it's going really quickly. All right. Positive trait is initiative. Without Mars, you don't have the energy to get up and do things. However, the nature of Mars is to bang around in the kitchen, sort of thing. You're doing it with sound effects. And he is the minor malefic, meaning that he just happens to bring 1/4 discord wherever he is. You know, he can't help but kick or knock something over or make a loud noise while he's doing it. Now, if Mars is strong and harmonious in your chart, then you will go through life with a lot of initiative. You're going to have the energy, passion, and courage to get things done. You'll tend to think about defense and protection. The nature of a harmonious Mars is to be constructive, to always be building something, to build up rather than tear down. However, the opposite is true if Mars is discordant. The individual is led towards impulsiveness. They have a lot of issues with lust and desire, anger, strife, destruction, aggression, active aggression, we'll say, and accidents and injuries, or fevers, or surgeries, or all things a discordant Mars will attract into a chart. In mythology, Jupiter, or Zeus, was chief among the gods, and Jupiter rules the religious urges of the soul, which have to do with rite and ritual and faith and a belief in a higher power, the need for being charitable, and expressing optimism. So, chief among the gods, Zeus would always be changing his shape in order to consort among the mortals. His symbols were thunderbolt, eagle, bull, and oak. Jupiter is the chief ruler of Sagittarius, the co-ruler of Pisces. So, the religious urges tend to attract abundance, opportunities, goodwill, and luck. We look at Jupiter in a chart as being one of the wealth builders. His positive traits are expressing with benevolence, always trying to do the good thing. The negative traits are being holier than thou, or being conceited, being righteous. He is the major benefic in the chart, so he tends to bring one-half harmony wherever he goes. It's like having Santa Claus come to visit. You know there's something in that bag for you. If powerful and harmonious, you are somebody that will appear to others to have luck. Your life is filled with opportunities. Affluence comes to you with not a whole lot of effort. You will tend to be charitable, easily giving from what you have. Others will note you for your generosity. Your life will have an element of faith, of believing that there is a higher power that walks with you and guides you and makes all of this possible. And, profound feelings of optimism. This is the person walking down the street, steps in a poo, and they're immediately looking for a puppy or a pony. Something good is going to come from this experience. So that's Jupiter for you. Discordant Jupiter means you could express with conceit or arrogance, a holier-than-thou attitude. You could be subject at times to righteousness or fanaticism. You could be overly optimistic. Oh, I think I'll take my life savings and spend it on lottery tickets this week. I'm feeling lucky. You could also be excessively generous and or self-indulgent. Why buy the pint of Haagen-Dazs if it comes in a gallon? Saturn in mythology was known as Kronos. His mother was the earth, Gaia, and his father, Uranus, or the sky, the heavens. Using his sickle, he castrated his father, throwing his member into the ocean, from which Aphrodite was born. So what's interesting, so often we think of Uranus as being the element of change. But Uranus is actually, from mythological perspectives, not the overthrower, but the one who's being overthrown. So, chief ruler of Capricorn, co-ruler of Aquarius. These are both the cold winter months. In the soul, we describe Saturn as the safety urges. Those things which are concerned with our well-being, our self-preservation, taking care of ourselves. The tendency for Saturn is to attract lack of resources. You have to work hard for everything you get. There are restrictions, losses, confinements, sorrows, responsibilities. I'm already feeling depressed. Where Saturn falls, we have poverty, and poverty could be seen as being a lack of resources. Where Saturn falls in your chart, there's a limit to what comes through that area. However, his positive traits are system. Dominant Saturn people can be very organized, very given towards planning. The negative trait is selfishness, which is basically, what's in this for me? What am I getting from this situation? Because of that, he's known as the major malefic, and wherever he goes, he brings one-half discord with him. So, if he's strong and positive in your chart, then you are someone who will have the natural ability to plan, to organize, and to have systems for everything. You are the person on the block who may be the block captain for emergency preparedness. You can operate in your life with foresight and prescience, moving the lawn and pushing the cup back from the edge of the table, knowing that somebody might knock it over as they pass by. You could operate in your life with personal discipline and structure, owning up to accountability. You'll tend to freely, though not always joyfully, shoulder duties and responsibilities, and you'll take conscientiousness into everything you do. Now, if Saturn's discordant, then you're going to suffer from experiences with greed and selfishness, be it your own or other people's. Periods of prolonged hardship, illness and physical disabilities, again, your own or others. Heavy losses, responsibilities, times of poverty, sorrows, grief, or depression. Not the first person on the party list.
What if Saturn is retrograde?
These periods of hardship can last longer. And you may find your organizational skills coming out later in life.
Does Saturn in general make for a late bloomer if it's emphasized?
You know, if it's dominant, it does. And I think the reason for that is a little more timidity than anything else. The rest of us are busy thrusting ourselves through the universe, taking risk on things. But because Saturn is so concerned about the safety, it will only take calculated risk. And much of what we learn, or the things called adventures in life, be they in love or travel or other risky undertakings, come about because we weren't being fearful. So we're usually good for that between about 13 and 28.
It can also make one do well with people that are older, right?
It draws one to geriatrics. And for example, Saturn governs my 11th house of friendships. As a child, I always had friends in the neighborhood that were old women. It's a perfect fit.
I bet you learned a lot.
I did.
Yes.
All the crones. All right, Uranus from mythology. This is Father Sky. Gaia was Mother Earth. Uranus was Father Sky. And the ancients conceived of him as the overarching dome of the heavens that turned on an axis, which you see here in this wonderful old mosaic floor from the Roman world. The study of the heavens, astrology, is ruled by Uranus. So Uranus is concerned with the cycles of things, and he is the chief ruler of Aquarius. He brings sudden change. In fact, he governs the individualistic urges. This is the need to be unique and different, to stand out in a crowd, to go to the beat of a different drummer, the square peg in the round hole, the person who's bucking authority or bucking convention in some ways. So, sudden change, erratic behavior, fads, novelties, inventions, discoveries. Where Uranus falls in your chart, you could be subject to either eccentricities or sudden changes.
Brilliance.
And brilliance. or at least the best trait is considered originality.
Genius.
Yeah, these are borderline geniuses in some way. The negative traits are the eccentricity, or I always say, if Uranus is dominant in someone's chart, they suffer from terminal uniqueness. And Uranus is neutral, so his conditioning comes from what other planets he's connected to.
How about if it's connected to Saturn?
Then there's a conflict, because one represents the upheld tradition, and the other wants to overturn the apple cart. And so there is, in that arrangement, there's an immediate conflict between the very old and the very new.
Could that make for like a futurist, a revolutionary who doesn't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater?
Or an antiquarian.
Harkening back to the golden age.
Exactly, and or collecting things from the ancient past. And looking at how it can be revivified or renewed or recycled in some ways. If your Uranus is harmonious, you're the person on the block who's going to be the tinkerer, always coming up with inventions, new insights, discoveries. You'll draw human agencies into your life that change your life. They're catalyst for remarkable things. And you live with heightened awareness of what's going on around you. If it's discordant, you'll suffer from all of that, because other peoples are going to see you as being quirky, eccentric, unconventional. Your opportunities may be erratic or unpredictable, and or the changes that come in your life may not be the ones you wanted. You can also suffer from hyperactivity if Uranus is really powerful but discordant.
Can be otherworldly as well, right?
I think of Neptune that way more, but Uranus, in a sense, is otherworldly, only in that they're not firmly planted in this one.
Yeah.
Neptune is definitely the otherworldly in sort of the mystical sense. And Poseidon, in mythology, was the god of horses and the sea. With one strike of his trident, which is the symbol for Neptune, he could cause earthquakes, shipwrecks, and drowning. Sailors would propitiate Poseidon by drowning horses as a sacrifice before heading out to seas. Sort of glad they don't do that anymore. And Neptune is the chief ruler of the sign Pisces, the mystical sign, the sign of water, the sign of inner space. And we call Neptune the utopian urges. Utopia is the ideal environment. So the utopian urges are those things, then those persons who are visionary, who experience imagination and intuition, but are also subject to illusions and fantasy thinking. But Neptune people are definitely otherworldly. They are psychic, they're intuitive, they're impressionable. They, however, we say where Neptune falls in your chart, you are subject to illusion. So I always like to say that's the area of your life where you need a reality check. The positive traits are idealism, and the world actually doesn't become a better place unless there are people thinking about how to make that happen. The negative traits, though, are vagueness. Sit a Neptune person down and ask them to describe their goals or visions or beliefs, and you may get a very rambling, circuitous conversation going on. If harmonious, you will have idealism, humanitarian goals, visionary ideas, heightened intuition, a lot of spiritual experiences, and increased sensitivity. But if discordant in your chart, with Neptune, you're subject to schemes, illusions, hypersensitivity, disappointments, confusion, and vagueness. Let's get through the last planet so we can look at some charts. This is a long class tonight. In Greco-Roman mythology, Pluto, or Hades, was the ruler of the underworld, and this included both Hades and the Elysian fields, basically heaven and hell. The symbols associated with Pluto were the helmet of darkness, which rendered the bearer invisible, and Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guarded the entrance to Hades, ensuring that those who entered could not leave. Chief ruler of Scorpio, and Pluto governs what we call the universal welfare urges. And that's the need to be connected to something greater than yourself, to know your place in the divine plan. However, the nature of Pluto is to attract circumstances of compliance, compulsion, conformity, obsessions, or group influences. Dominant Pluto people are often, conspiracy theorists. They're looking for the hidden plot or plan behind everything, or they're looking for the divine energy behind everything. What makes all of this tick? What are the hidden forces? They are subject to conformity, which means that those around them, from family to school to culture to companions to the groups that they belong in, want them to toe the party line. Their best trait is their cooperation, their desire to work together with others for a common cause. And their worst trait is coercion, either being highly manipulative themselves or being subject to coercion by outside forces. So if harmonious and powerful, you will be engaged in cooperative efforts. You'll have a sense of community or belonging. Your experiences with groups tend to be positive. You'll be somebody who's aware of your life's purpose, and you'll go through life with this feeling of interconnectedness. If discordant, there's a tendency to have negative experiences with groups, and they want you to be orthodox. Or you'll have experiences with compulsion, conformity, you'll have obsessions, mob influences, that sort of thing. Now, Fred, in case you've not fallen asleep, sometimes in a chart, what is dominant is either the ascendant or the midheaven. What we have to do when we're interpreting the chart is we step down to the first most powerful planet, because that will tell us the urge or the drive that dominates the personality. The ascendant is the cusp of the first house. The midheaven is the cusp of the 10th house. And I have it on your handout. It doesn't show here. Midheaven, ascendant. They're the only house cusps. They're known as angles that we give the power of planets. So, going further, the ascendant is the grounding wire of the soul to the physical body. Now, if this is dominant in your chart, then you're going to be somebody who's very into your body, into being physical, experiencing life through your body, whether it's hiking, swimming, running, dancing, making love, touching everything around you. That's the nature of the ascendant, is to experience life through form. If the midheaven is dominant in the chart, it's somewhat similar to a dominant sun, but not the same. It doesn't necessarily rule this incredible drive towards power, but it does signify somebody who stands out in the crowd. This is the point of highest elevation in the chart, so it's sort of like the lightning rod. It's the thing that captures attention. It stands out. So, the person with the dominant midheaven, I always describe as being a driven individual. Since their childhood, they feel like they have to amount to something and make their mark on the world. They're high achievers. Or they may be low achievers with really high goals. You know, they may not always make it to their goals. But nevertheless, you tend to stand out and be noticed. Now again, if it's harmonious, you stand out and are noticed and you're getting the award. If it's discordant, you stand out and are noticed and are getting the reprimand. But regardless, if the midheaven's dominant in your chart, whatever you do tends to come before the public view. So, the dominant planet of the chart, selected as previously indicated, is the most important factor. As the most influential planet in the chart, more of its particular quality of energy flows through the stellar structure of the astral form than any other. Because the dominant planet maps the dynamic stellar structure through which the most energy flows, it must be considered as the first importance in determining character, even in determining temperament. And lastly, with the quotes from Ken Stone is, the important thing that must be realized by the user of Astrodynes, who would use them proficiently, is that Astrodyne power is an indicator of the strength of the desires in the individual. So, we've got 13 minutes. Let's look at the charts. Surprise, surprise. Donald Trump is a dominant sun personality. Throw out keywords of what you learned tonight about the sun. Powerful, dictatorial. What else did I hear? Rulership. Significance. So, if this person walked into your office and you hadn't seen him on TV or in news headlines or anything else, and you had the Astrodynes available to you, and you could see the power of this chart, what would you talk to this man about?
Well, he's a communicator. That's for sure.
Because of his Gemini sun?
Well, in the 11th house, he needs to share himself with other people.
All right. Though communicator we would think of as Mercury, which is not that powerful. But we would say that this is somebody whose basic needs are to be noticed, to have power, to be the boss, to be in charge, to exercise significance, and somebody who would want to be respected by his friends, his associates, or known in group activities.
He also has Leo on an angle, the first house. So that would make him like wanting
The
to
sun
express.
represents then his personality.
That's right.
So we can see that it not only shares influence of wanting to be important among groups of people, but it's a desire to be noticed personally.
But,
And-
but in harmony, it's a discord rather than.
So, if we were to go down our list of negative sun traits, what might we come up with about this man?
Dictatorial.
All right. Prideful, dictative, egotism, loss of honor, loss of esteem, problems with authorities.
That's all true.
Especially now.
Yeah.
So, boom. In just a few minutes, you've done a delineation on a chart, and you've put your thumb on somebody's soul. If you just met this person for a few minutes and had that time with them, and gave them that information, they would think, oh, this person knows me.
Also, the moon, though, is pretty powerful in this chart.
It is, second in strength.
Right, so he's also has an emotional, domestic.
So family's important to him.
Right.
Where does the sun get its power? Well, let's look here. The sun is forming aspects to everything in the chart, with the exception of Mercury and Neptune. And look at the number of parallels that the sun is making. It's actually the parallel aspects that are giving it the power. These aspects are not all that powerful, but there is a number of them. That is what adds up to create this strength in the chart. So his power urges are connected to his domestic urges. Look,
Right.
22 Gemini to 20 Sagittarius. That is a powerful opposition.
Right.
We have 22 Gemini to 25 Cancer. There you have one sign apart or a semi-sextile.
Yeah.
And then we could look to
17 Libra.
26
Yeah.
Leo. So we're moving along here to a sextile. Well, 120 degrees apart to 17 Libra. That's a significant aspect. That'll give one confidence in whatever they do.
Right.
The optimism to bounce back from, failures.
Well, he's had many.
Right. And it's quite often the failures that teach us the most in life. So,
That's the best experience.
and then if you have failures and you're an optimist, you actually recover from them.
Right.
And that's third house, so it improves his communication ability, even if he doesn't get it from his Mercury. And it's exactly sextile his rising sign,
Right.
Jupiter and
17
the three ascendant are exactly sextile.
Right.
And if we look here, the sun forms a semi-sextile to Saturn. It's in conjunction with Uranus.
Right.
Is the man a little odd?
Well, he's an individual.
An individual.
Very individualistic person.
He's quirky.
Yeah.
And not afraid to think big, because
Not afraid to think bigger,
that
differently.
Uranus is exactly trine Jupiter,
Yeah.
Exactly.
and with the rising sign right in the middle of them.
Let's look down here. Here we have it. That's looks like his most harmonious aspect. So in a few classes, we're going to look at harmony and discord. These are important things. But since we have 5 minutes, let's move on to the next person so we can just do our
Very helpful.
quick readings. All right, let's say the ghost of Mohandas Gandhi came to you and wanted a reading. I think he died in 1949, so it'd be a little hard for him to actually get here. But if we look at this chart and we wanted to say descriptive things about it in a short period of time, if we wanted to get to the meat or the theme of this chart, don't want to use meat for a lifelong vegetarian. If we want to get to the theme of the chart, we have a dominant moon.
Right.
The domestic urges, which have to do with home, family, nesting, nurturing, or caretaking.
Right.
His caretaking was in part for his family, but it was also for his nation.
Right.
It was in the 10th house of reputation.
In Leo. So,
This is the Astrodynes we've been looking at in tonight's class, where the domestic urges are most powerful and the power urges are weakest. The sun is tucked away in the 12th house. What type of powers is a 12th house sun looking for?
well, for humanitarian.
Psychic powers, humanitarian powers, powers of control over oneself.
Right.
But with the moon dominant in the 10th house, this is somebody who became a household name. 10th house of reputation.
Right.
There isn't a home in India that you could go in and say, you know, Gandhiji, and not have that person recognized, whether they're in favor of him or not. But that's how popular, that's the moon. The good word to associate with the moon is popular. How well known is it? Now, let's quickly move along. There, you've just done, with only one factor in a chart, looking at the dominant planet, you've done a delineation, and you've gotten to the core of the individual. Let's go back a minute. Where does the moon get all of its power? The moon makes aspects to the sun, to Venus, to Mars, to Jupiter. Oh, there's 3 squares in a row. To Saturn, to Uranus, to Neptune, 1 trine, and another square to Pluto, and a sextile to the ascendant. So the moon is not only dominant, it's going to be discordant.
Right.
Let's look at that. A minus 1235. So is this somebody that would naturally want to be a household name? No. But would do it reluctantly and for the benefit of humanity.
That's right.
I was interested in what you said about the sun in the 12th, that they were concerned with psychic power, self-mastery, and you said one more thing that I wouldn't have thought of. Do you remember?
Oh no. Go back and watch the tape.
Yeah.
Okay. Dominant. No, I didn't arrange these. Sorry, this is arranged in neutral order. So, it's hard to see here. We have to go, I thought I corrected that. We have to go to the center row here and find the largest number. 14.1%,
Mercury.
the planet Mercury.
Right.
So this is showing you another way of sorting Astrodynes, which is just Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, all the way down to the ascendant, houses 1 through 12, signs Aries through Pisces. I find this harder to read. I'd rather see the power lined up in a column and go with it that way. But this is just to show you other sorting. Well, what do we know about Barbara Walters?
Communicator.
She is a communicator. She is
And
an
she's-
author. She
Yes.
is somebody who was one of the first women telejournalists. She was on TV for how many years? 50 years?
Oh, she's
Does
a
anyone remember?
smart lady.
Yeah.
And
Despite
it's
having
also
all
in
this-
Mercury's also in her first house conjunct Mars, and that's where her aggressive interview.
and those are her 2 most powerful planets.
Right.
Yep, and let's look at the aspects. Mercury, conjunct Mars, look at the power of that aspect, 14.20. So if you're looking at the dominant aspect in a chart, you described it, aggressive or assertive interview style.
Exactly. She never shied away.
She cut people to the quick.
That's right.
You know, we've got 2 seconds in the interview, left. The burning question America wants to know is,
But she could do it with such grace. Look at how powerful.
it's in Libra.
Yeah, Libra is
Sharing
extremely
relationship
way
type.
the most powerful sign in her chart, and she's got the sun on the ascendant.
So it's 28% of the power in her chart. That's more than a fourth, not quite a third. And that's going to give her a sense of graciousness, a sense of politics. But the Mars-Mercury, the malefic titan with Mercury,
It's
could be...
opposed her moon.
Okay, there, it's almost exactly opposing the moon. So that creates some issues. So I see this more as the constraints that she came up against, the glass
Another
ceiling,
thing.
as she, as a woman, tried to advance in the news industry, 9th house. So she was subject to, being held back. There were certain people that said they didn't want to co-anchor with a
Right.
woman. I mean, it was unheard of in the 60s.
Yeah,
A woman on TV with that much power? Aren't they supposed to
yeah,
be hand models?
right.
So maybe she could crack through that because of the Jupiter-Moon conjunction up there.
And clearly, she did. She had luck in that area. She traveled and talked to foreign leaders everywhere.
Oh, yes, she's a neat lady.
Iranian president.
Oh,
Ahmadinejad?
Ahmadinejad, yeah.
Yeah, her interview with him was one of the more interesting. He was
But
just floored at how a woman could be speaking so directly to him.
But she also has cancer on the 10th house, which, you know, she did. I always had a sense that her interviews were related to world, interests. For the good somehow. It was like her house. The world was her house, and she was trying to put things in order.
I think that's a very good perspective.
Yeah.
And that could be the moon, again, the moon, co-ruler of the 10th house.
Right.
But Pluto, universal welfare,
That's right.
is in the 10th house of career and looking
Right.
for a mass destiny. Something that, television, that touches how many homes.
Yeah, she was, in that sense, she was nurturing to be able to bring some sense, through her interviews.
She's still alive, isn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was just fine.
Oops. All right. Next week, dominant houses, followed by dominant signs. Then we're going to look at power, the aspects, their power, their harmony, and the discord. How that describes the idiosyncrasies in a person's temperament. Then on October 11th, we're going to look at the societies, the trinities, the elements, and the qualities in a chart, and how that brands us in terms of our temperament. And then last class, we're going to be looking at harmony and discord, and I'm tempted on that class to bring in the charts of the two political candidates for the U.S. presidency. Not to create a fracas in the room, but to have, polite discussion of the strengths and weaknesses of each candidate. So,
Good.
all right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight.